Conservatives, let's talk about plans for Reconstruction. Conservatives accept abolition. That's as far as they're willing to go. These are conservative Republicans in the North. They say, look, we freed the slaves, that's it, we're done. Radical Republicans, men like Charles Sumner, the guy who got beat so badly by Preston Brooks in the Congress, and Thaddeus Stevens, will lead the Radical Republicans, and they want to not only free the blacks, they want to take the vote away from rebellious rights, and they want to use the Northern Army to protect black civil rights in the South. Primarily, they want to make sure their goal is to get black people voting, because if black people vote, as we're going to see, Republicans will win. They are even wanting to go so far as to take property away from the whites and redistribute that to the blacks. This is the most extreme position. Moderate Republicans want abolition, and they want to use the army to protect civil rights, but they don't want to punish the whites. They don't want to take the vote away or take the land away. Lincoln was actually one of the more lenient Reconstruction plans. He believed that there were loyal Southerners. These were the old Whigs. Remember, the Whigs used to have a significant presence in the South. And he believed that they could take these people and use them to create the basis of new state governments in the South. His first proposal, which is announced in December of 1863, would offer amnesty to all whites except for the highest-ranking members of the Confederacy. So Jeff Davis and Robert E. Lee would not get amnesty, but almost everybody else would. You had to take a loyalty oath, and you had to swear that you accepted abolition or accepted that the slaves had been freed. When 10% of the 1860 voter rolls took these oaths and accepted abolition, the state could be readmitted. Educated, landowning, or black veterans, those who fought for the Union, would be allowed to vote. So if you were white, you got to vote, period. If you're a white man. Of course, you're a woman, you didn't get to vote no matter what. If you were black, and you had an education and you owned land, or you were a Union veteran, you could vote. Louisiana, Arkansas, and Tennessee actually meet these qualifications and are technically readmitted to the Union under this plan. But the radicals become outraged, and they refuse to accept this, and they don't even let Louisiana, Arkansas, and Tennessee. And in July 1864, so 6 months later, they proposed their own plan, Radical Reconstruction, or the Wade-Davis Bill. The president, according to this plan, will appoint a provisional government for each state. When the majority pledge loyalty, the state can call a constitutional convention, but only people who do not participate in the rebellion can attend the constitutional convention. The new constitution must repudiate the war debt. They didn't want the states claiming their Civil War debt. Must take the vote away from the leaders of the Confederacy and abolish slavery. There's no mention of black civil rights in this Reconstruction plan, by the way. Lincoln pocket vetoes this. He just simply refuses to sign it and claims that because Congress is out of session when he does, that the bill dies. And the radicals begin to get extremely angry with Lincoln. Of course, they'll probably, I guess, forgive him somewhat on April 14, 1865, when Lincoln is shot and killed while attending a play at the Ford Theater. He's shot, amazingly enough, by a man named John Wilkes Booth, who's a member of the most famous acting family in America at the time. It would be like if one of the Baldwins killed the president today. This was not just some random guy. This was a celebrity. When he kills Lincoln, he leaps onto the stage at the theater, breaks his leg, incidentally, and screams, "Sic semper tyrannis," death to tyrants, which points out that a lot of the upset with Lincoln was the fact that he ignored the Constitution, although clearly Booth's a Virginian, was pro-slavery, don't get me wrong. It was actually part of a larger conspiracy to kill many U.S. leaders. They wanted to take out enough people that they could get a politician they liked in charge. And so they tried to kill Secretary of State William Seward, who was shot and wounded. They were also going to try to kill the Vice President, Andrew Johnson, but that guy chickened out. On April 26, Booth is caught up with in a barn where he's going to meet his end. 8 will be convicted in the conspiracy. 4 will be hanged, including the first woman ever hung in America. Although today we believe she didn't have anything to do with it. She just owned the boarding house where these guys met. The radical Republicans tend to blame the entire South for Lincoln's death. The assassination of Lincoln was a terrible mistake politically for the South. Not that they did it, just one guy did it. But it was a disaster for the South because any chance that there might be a friendly Reconstruction plan disappears with Lincoln's assassination. And the desire for revenge takes over. With Lincoln dead, the leadership of the country at this incredibly critical stage of our history falls to his vice president, Andrew Johnson. Now remember, Andrew Johnson was a Democrat. 1864, Lincoln fears losing. He runs on a Union ticket. He does not run on a Republican ticket. And now we have Andrew Johnson, who is really spectacularly unqualified to be president at this point. He was from Tennessee. He did side with the North in the Civil War. He was a tailor. He grew up very poor, and his family had no kind of reliance on slavery in its history. And he had a tremendous resentment and anger towards the slave aristocracy of the South, which is really going to color how he approaches Reconstruction. That's his house that his family grew up in, by the way, when he was a kid. Look how tiny that thing is. And there was a bunch of them. He had a very large family. I'm always interested in that. Johnson will not use the word Reconstruction. He calls it restoration. Remember, he is a Southerner, so in one sense he's a little kinder to the South. In the summer of 1865, he waits until Congress goes into recess, so they're not meeting, and he offers his own Reconstruction plan. He offers amnesty in exchange for an oath of allegiance. But my favorite part is that if you were a high-ranking member, or if you had above so much money and wealth, you had to come ask for Andrew Johnson's forgiveness personally. And this was who he was. He was resentful of the powerful and the wealthy in the South, and so he relished the idea of them coming to his office and begging personally for forgiveness. But Johnson would set up provisional governments, and the provisional governments would choose who got to attend a constitutional convention. The constitutions of the new states must revoke secession, abolish slavery, and ratify the new 13th Amendment. They would also have to give up our war debt. The 13th Amendment, by the way, is the amendment that's going to make slavery illegal. It's going to end the idea of owning people legally in this country. By the end of 1865, all the states had met one plan or another, but the radical Republican Congress still refused to allow Southern states back in. They were angry over the South's reluctance to abolish slavery, the refusal to grant the right to vote, which hadn't been a condition up to this point, by the way, and the South's insistence on electing Confederate political leaders and generals to Congress. For example, the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, is immediately elected to the House of Representatives from Georgia. And so we're going to move into a new phase, radical Reconstruction.